Excellent. Well, we are at a minute past the top of the hour, so I think it's a good time to go ahead and get started. We can keep admitting people as they come in. That's no issue at all. Do you want to kick us off, Mary, on this before we get into today's topic of taking control of employee retention?
Yes, I would love to. Okay, well, I would love to kick this off. I guess, when I started CorTalent, a little over 12 years ago, and by the way, I'm the CEO of CorTalent. I failed to introduce myself, but I think I know pretty much everybody that's on our webinar today. When I started it, I always thought about talent as so much more obviously than just recruiting. And my background prior to going into search was working with more strategic talent management services, actually for Fortune 500 companies. So working for very, very large organizations. But I loved the systems and processes that we created. And then shortly after I started CorTalent and decided to focus more on small to mid-sized growing businesses, I really saw this need for strategic HR support. And we've always been doing a little bit of this type of work for our clients. Most of it has been pro bono in the course of doing the search work, but we have seen, just such great success in the companies that we've worked with. And so I'm really excited now that we have Rick, who has joined our team, to be offering more of these strategic HR consulting services to our client organizations. So I'm going to let Rick talk a little bit about himself and his background, and then we'll get into why you're here today.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. It's just an absolute pleasure and an honor for me to be here. Not only sharing this content with you today, but also just to be part of this CorTalent team. I came on board just before the start of the year, and it's just been an absolute joy to join a team of individuals who are just so passionate about helping organizations get the people part right. Obviously, we have an extraordinarily strong reputation when it comes to executive recruiting services, and Mary, I go back to some of the conversations that we had mid last year around, gosh, wouldn't it be fun to start up a consulting practice at CorTalent and or really like supercharge the consulting services that we can provide our clients. And it's just, fast forward to today, to this webinar, kind of a dream come true in a lot of ways. Now, in just around who I am, my professional background, I've spent the overwhelming majority of my career in the talent management and talent development space. My formal education is in organizational psychology. And so really what that means is helping create change at a system level for organizations and then also at an individual level. The types of organizations that I've been a part of kind of scale from the really, really large at United Health Group and United Healthcare to the public global organizations, MTS Systems, the private domestic organizations at Starkey Hearing Technology. And then I also actually have my own side business, which is a leadership development startup called Groveland Leadership. And so my experience kind of runs the gamut from really, really big, established, formal to small, scrappy startup. The consistent themes in all of my experiences thus far is I really embrace a strategic business partner mindset. Obviously, here at CorTalent, we help you get the people part right, but we always operate with the understanding of what is going to be best for you as the executive in your organization, and what does your business really need from a people strategy or a talent need in order to propel your business forward. And then any intervention of any size requires some understanding of change management. And so navigating the path between current state and future state not only requires good project management and technical skill sets, but just an understanding in terms of how to help people through that change process. And so we bring that in every engagement that we do. So that's a little bit about me. Now let's get to why you're actually here, because it's not to hear me talk about my background. It's to hear some ideas around how to take charge of employee retention. I don't think I have to sell anybody on the fact that this is a very front of mind pressing concern for many organizations. We're actually thinking about doing a different topic. And then for our first webinar, and then at a team meeting, we all kind of collectively agreed, should we actually be talking about employer retention? We were like, yeah, we should actually be talking about employer retention, just because it's so front of mind for so many organizations. In terms of the way that we'll address this topic, we'll kind of answer three main questions. We'll spend a little bit of time understanding how we got here, right? What are some of the contextual aspects that created this current environment? We'll spend, again, a little bit of time, but not the majority of the time, sharing ideas around how to move forward. And in that section of the content, we'll talk about concepts that maybe you've heard of or you're familiar with, but our goal is to focus on what are the practical actions that you as a leader can take to really take charge of employee retention. And so we hope that even if you're familiar with some of these topics, you'll walk away with some more nuanced understandings of how you can leverage these ideas to move your organizations forward. And then for a healthy amount of time, we'll actually get you into breakout conversations. And the breakout conversations are just a really valuable opportunity for you to share ideas with peers in this session. What actions are going to be most meaningful for you as a leader in the context of your organization? What are some of the other leaders doing to take charge of employee retention? And so we're confident the breakout session is going to yield a lot of positive outcomes in terms of how you think about this content moving forward. I, as a facilitator, will press you to think about what commitments you're going to take. And so if you're looking at the right-hand side of the screen, agenda item number 3, commitments. I always want to make sure you're giving us a full hour of your time. We want to make sure that feels like it's a time really well spent. And so identifying a commitment or two is a really great way to ensure you have something to work on as a result of attending this webinar. Okay, before we get started and really dive into the content, I'm curious to know what the frame of reference is that you are bringing to today's webinar. What are your biggest concerns? And so if you can, in the chats, just chat A, B, C, or D based on wherever it is that you're coming from. What are the most pressing items? If you have multiple pressing items, feel free to put multiple things in the chat. But I want to know, what is it that you are focused on and what you want to get out of today's session? Mary, I see you leading the way. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep.
If you do write D, by the way, a little bit of context I think could be useful, just to help us understand where it is that you're coming from. A lot of C, which is understandable. Expectations, I think, have been changing what feels like on a weekly basis in some regards. And we'll certainly touch on that topic throughout our webinar. Sometimes B, worried about company culture. Thank you, Kendra. I appreciate that transparency. We don't explicitly talk about company culture in today's session, but there's a lot of overlap between proactively managing your culture and its impact on employee retention. So we'll kind of glance that topic. Oh, Tony, I'm really glad that you put that comment in the chat. What we're going to focus on today are the non-compensation actions that you can take to lead your teams more effectively and minimize employee retention. Because as you called out, it's obvious you can always pay people more money. We know based on research, it's about 2 paychecks, and then they get used to that. Then it's like the novelty, the coolness of having more salary, the psychological benefit of that money falls by the wayside. It starts to fade. So what are the non-compensation things you can do? That's really, really useful.
2 paychecks, that's 1 month.
Correct. Yeah, so you're buying 1 month of sort of extra discretionary effort, and then after that, you're getting what you had before you gave the pay increase. All right, so let's talk about how we got here. There's a lot being written on the Great Recession. I pulled out a headline that I thought did a nice job capturing just the depth and the breadth that the Great Recession is having on the U.S. economy right now. This is actually an article that was published mid-February. And so it has data that references through January, because that was the most recent data available. Some more recent data has come out in the past handful of days, hasn't changed. So this trend of 4 million Americans quitting their jobs continues now, about 7 months in a row. And just a couple of statistics that are kind of eye-popping. So 4 million Americans quitting their job every month since July of 2021. I mean, that's just an unprecedented amount of transition in workers. In November, we reached a record high at 4.5 million people leaving their jobs voluntarily. That's the highest in the 2 decades of the Bureau of Labor Statistics tracking this information. And then in January, there was 11.3 million job openings, and there are not 11.3 million job seekers. So there are literally more jobs than there are employees, which is just kind of, it just takes you a minute to wrap your head around the full scope of what it is that we're experiencing in this current moment. What does this all mean? Like, let's put some context around the situation. It's true, we are in a period of disruption. If this feels different, if this feels unusual, that is legitimate. We have not experienced this much transition in terms of workers moving from one company to another in the past. It is also fair to say that leaders and businesses were largely caught off guard. And this is justifiable. I think this is justifiable from a couple of different reasons. If you think about where leaders and businesses' headspaces have been over the past 2.5 years, it's been navigating a pandemic, right? Like that is its own massive disruption that's been going on. Not necessarily thinking, oh, I need to rework how I lead my teams, because all of a sudden there's just a girth of opportunity for employees out there that I didn't have to compete against. But the reality is we need to catch up, so to speak, in our headspace and our mindset in terms of what today's current realities really mean for our organizations. But as Tony mentioned in his chat, a lot of businesses are feeling this pinch. And the pinch can best be described as external talent being more expensive. I want to go out and hire someone, but my goodness, the salary expectations are way off what I thought they would be. And then also my internal talent is expecting more. I've seen this time and time again where internal talent is sometimes saying like, listen, I could go get this job at this other company tomorrow and it would increase my salary by 25%. What are you going to do for me? And that's just a really difficult position for business leaders to be in. Now, if you take those challenges and you kind of package them into an opportunity, the opportunity really is a once in a generation period to rethink your company culture, rethink the processes that go into leading your teams effectively. There's just so much, collective energy right now around taking a step forward in terms of what it means to provide an engaging workplace. And so there are options available to leaders that maybe haven't been available in the past just due to the kind of drastic nature of the current environment that we're operating in.
Rick, we had a great question. Where did those 24 million people go? And it's a mixed bag. Part of it is we have less population today. A lot of our baby boomers have retired. Some retired early. We have, some generations of workforce, probably in all generations, who are either choosing not to work or doing something completely different. So there's just a number of different challenges that go into, why we have the labor shortage. I don't know if you have anything else to add there.
Yeah, it is a great question. It is fair to say that not all industries have been impacted equally by the Great Resignation. And so a lot of what you see are people exiting certain industries. So like healthcare specifically has been adversely impacted, which I think should come as a surprise to nobody. I mean, the burnout statistics are just unbelievable when you start looking at healthcare professionals. And so there's literally a recognition of like, I'm not getting paid enough to be treated like this or to do this kind of work. And so you see certain industries being harder hit, to be quite frank, than others. Also, I think there are some correlational demographics that you could draw from Great Resignation statistics. Younger employees and employees earlier on in their career have left their jobs at a higher rate. And so that doesn't necessarily answer where did they go, but they're finding that they can advance their career even incrementally by going to a different organization. And so there's a bit of just taking more control, right? I think the pessimistic view is that you're being opportunistic, but the positive view is that individuals are just taking more control over their careers, and if they can get more responsibility at another organization, or if another organization is willing to invest in them and give them, take a chance on them, they're seizing that opportunity right now. It's, just speaking personally, I think every time I log on LinkedIn, the first post that I see is that like balloon post where it's like, I'm starting a new job. So it's just colloquially, I feel like I've seen a lot of it in my own network. Okay, one last slide and then we'll get on to how to move forward. We contemplated not including this slide because the benefits of improving employee retention or minimizing the negative impact that employee retention has is in large part intuitive, right? Your company does better, your employees stay longer, you get more out of your company. Where I think that there is additional benefit, like where are some of the hidden benefits, or what are some of the more nuanced positive impacts of addressing employee retention? The value that each employee starts to go up. And so when you as a leader do things that positively impact employee retention, your employees are more engaged. More engaged employees are more productive. They produce better, more creative ideas. They collaborate more effectively with each other. And so there are all sorts of downstream positive impacts outside of the fact that the tenure gets longer, right? Now, for organizations that are currently challenged with employee retention, you're probably feeling the bottom right corner. When you have high employee retention, or yes, low employee retention, I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly, you just have to spend more time doing tactical activities, tactical training that's not strategic, kind of getting people up and running type training. Onboarding is a very important activity. It is also labor intensive and time intensive. And so if you can spend less time onboarding new employees and more time helping and supporting current employees become, quite frankly, better at their current jobs, everybody ends up winning. And so it's not to say that tactical training onboarding is, like not where you should be spending your time of. It's just when people are quitting and you have to hire new people, it takes a lot of effort to get them up and running. And so there's just a lot of benefits to addressing employee retention. Mary, anything you wanted to add on that topic?
Nope, let's get on to the meat.
So how to move forward. We're going to talk about 3 areas that you as a leader can focus on to take control of employee retention and minimize the impact that it's going to have on your organization. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because, again, not all of it is new. And we want to focus on the practical ideas and the discussion as much as we can. So the first one area we want to talk about is leadership mindset. And leadership mindset can mean different things to different people. In the context of today's conversation, it's really an understanding that my attitudes and beliefs as a leader impact my actions, and my actions obviously impact how I lead. So how you show up as a leader, the way that you lead your team starts with your mindset. Now, as it relates to your leadership mindset, and really mindsets in general, they can be difficult to change. It is challenging to change mindsets in any point in time. It is even harder to do it during disruption. And so level setting that if it feels like a difficult thing now, it's because it really truly is hard. And it's hard to know when your mindsets are outdated. And so we're going to talk about some actions you can take to check whether or not your mindsets might be rooted in the past rather than the current environment. Now, when you get it right, when you have a mindset that is anticipating and aligned with the needs of your company and employees, you're better able to adapt and respond to challenges. You're pivoting faster, you're making better decisions. It also encourages really strong leadership skills. So your listening goes up, your communication goes up, you're more empathetic to the needs of your customers and your employees. And so there's just all sorts of positives that come from your leadership mindset.
Yeah, Rick, I'd like to just add a comment there. You know, as someone who has been leading and managing people for about 30 years, yes, that's going to date me. And for somebody who's committed my entire career to people and to developing people and leading people, never has there been a couple years where I have realized that, wow, I don't know half of what I need to know as a leader, because things are changing so quickly. And so, I read, I attend webinars like this, we collaborate. Sometimes we just try different things to see, if it sticks. But I think the important message there is the world has forever changed. It's continuing to change at a very fast pace. And I don't think we'll ever know exactly what to do. And that's why it's so important to really have that empathy and to put yourself in your employee's shoes. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So,
Yeah, very well said, Mary. Very, very well said. Now, the model actually comes from Franklin Covey, if you're familiar with that organization. The model that is really effective at helping leaders sort of check their own mindset is this understanding of what is in my control, and then acting on what is in my control, and then what isn't in my control, and what do I just need to learn to accept. And then kind of that middle ring is, if something isn't in my control, but it's sort of close, how can I influence the situation to come to an outcome that's favorable either to my organization or would benefit my employees and colleagues. And just to add a little bit of clarity on this model, I actually had 2 conversations within a 12-hour span. It was at the end of one workday and then at the beginning of the next workday. They were both with executives, CEOs of an organization, and it was on the topic of wanting to work from home. And the language was just astounding to me. It was, it was like, well, my employees, this is something that's happening to me. Like, I don't know what to do. And I just wish everybody could kind of like understand that it's important to work in the office. And so, not to use overly dramatic term, but it was a little bit victim approach, right? Like, oh gosh, I wish this wouldn't happen to me. And what it spoke to me was that there was a misunderstanding in terms of all of the areas that were in this leader's control and what they needed to learn to either influence or accept. And so just kind of working through what that situation could look like using this model. Control, as for a CEO specifically, there is a lot that a CEO can control. And that was the direct feedback was, you can create the rules. You can determine who is and isn't eligible for remote work, and you get to say why. And so just starting from that perspective, that's a healthier mindset for a CEO to embrace. There's also a lot that a CEO can do to influence. That role has the biggest impact on culture. They get to identify what are the practices that we want to embrace around either working from home or hybrid or in office. What we know based on research is that you can do things that make in-office work more desirable, things that wouldn't have felt necessary in the past, and that makes people want to come into the office. You can also encourage your management team to embrace a more creative approach. So those are really strong influence criteria. And then, of course, accepting, and this is really what Mary said so eloquently, the world's different, expectations have changed, and there's more acceptance that leaders need to go through, especially in this moment of disruption, than they have in the past. Now, some behaviors that really help shape a healthy leadership mindset. You could say these are important at any point in time, but I think especially important right now. Empathy, and not like hypothetical or sort of an academic understanding of empathy, but really challenging yourself to think about what are the needs of other individuals in this situation. I was just talking with someone earlier today, and he was saying, I was trying to create COVID protocols, and I wasn't always aware of the fact that people might have immunocompromised people at home. They might need to stay home or feel scared to come into an office. And so empathy is just so important. Being able to admit mistakes, especially during a time of disruption, is so critical. No one's going to expect leaders to get it perfect right now, but being able to admit mistakes really helps maintain that healthy sense of collaboration in an organization. And then embracing change, adaptability, right? Being willing to experiment. Is a very important behavior that helps shape a leader mindset right now. So the questions on the right, which I'm not going to go through in any great detail, help you as a leader keep yourself in check, right? Am I embracing the right leadership mindset for my team given the current environment? Okay, let's move to the second area that leaders can use to help take control of employee retention. And wanted to talk about flexible workplaces, but make sure we're thinking about flexible workplaces in a broad context, because so quickly our brain goes to hybrid work, and I think we've all been inundated in terms of the pros and cons of working at home, and there's strong opinions on both sides. Really want to take a step back and say flexible workplaces, what we mean is a general or broad rethinking around when, where, and how we work. Another way of saying that is around work-life integration. And Mary, I think you kind of had a perspective on work-life integration you wanted to share, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not here to say work-life integration is better than work-life balance or anything else. And for those of you who haven't heard the new buzzword work-life integration, it was really more of this concept that we bring our work, our professional and our personal lives even closer together. So I think the challenge is there are many different types of workers out there. There are some of us who come from the traditional, 8 to 5, where our work was very separate from our personal lives. And then we came into this work-life balance, which, how do you balance? So, and work-life balance means you have, you're feeling completely content in both sides, personal and professional, which there are a lot of opinions out there that that's impossible because there just isn't enough time. And then this notion of work-life integration. And again, it's really thinking outside of the box in terms of when people work. And so we can talk a little bit more about that, maybe even our breakout sessions on what we've seen some clients do, and it's pretty cool. So.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Mary. Now, just to dive a little bit deeper into the risks and opportunities of flexible workplaces, and Mary, again, said it perfectly. We're not going back. Things have changed. And so pulling forward new concepts like flexible workplaces, like spending a little time thinking about what work-life integration might mean, can be really, really useful. Now, employees will leave companies that are perceived as unfairly inflexible. That word unfairly is important, right? But flexibility is becoming more and more important, not just where, right? But also when and how we get our work done. Now, when leveraged appropriately, flexible workplaces can be more productive. The data is really starting to pull this forward in a crystal clear fashion, that retention goes up, which is obviously core to today's webinar, but also engagement goes up. Employees like flexibility, which should be no shocker. They have more creativity. They're more productive because they're working at times leaning into flexibility when they can produce the most value. And that ultimately has a reduction on waste. Rework goes down when people have a little bit more autonomy and say in terms of when, where, and how they work. So it's just a really important concept for us to think through. Again, not at an academic level, but more at a practical level. Now, LinkedIn, they do some large research projects every year. They've done a global talent trend the past handful of years, and I thought these statistics were just fascinating. What LinkedIn found was that when employees feel like their workplace has flexibility, they're more than 2.5 times likely to report being happy. Which you might say, well, that's nice, Rick, but what does that really mean? Well, it means that they're getting their work done, they're not feeling burnt out and stressed. And so all of the negative aspects of what work has sort of felt like and looked like over the past 2 years, those people aren't experiencing it. So they're doing great work, they're producing for their organizations, they are happy, engaged employees. They're also more than double likely to recommend working for the company. And so they start recruiting other great talent on your behalf, which I can't think of a stronger way to combat employee retention than to exercise all of your employees as recruiters. Now, what?
There
Oh,
was
yeah.
Rick, there was a question about engagement and flexibility seeming to be counter to each other. I think much of what you just explained, pertains to that. But would you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the question. Okay. I guess
Engagement and
I'm not fully tracking how engagement and flexibility would be counter to each other. I mean, I'll sort of speak from the frameworks that I've operated under. Engagement often boils down to like, are the right structures in place that allow me to do my work well? Am I building new skills and being challenged? And do I see value in contributing towards the organization that I'm working for? And so I actually think that there's
I have
Oh, yeah.
other thought. I think where this question comes from, plus I know Tony. I think engagement sometimes is looked at as the fun, the culture, the fun stuff
Yeah.
that we do together. And that's harder to do when we're in a really distributed, more flexible environment. But actually, statistics show that it's not the fun stuff that Mary Bingo, it's not the fun stuff that creates the engagement. I mean, that helps
Yeah.
for sure, but it's really meeting people where they're at so that they can become, just more productive, and they can see the value that they're bringing to the company. And when we talk about employee development, which is the number one, focus we want on today's webinar, I think it'll really drive home what engagement means with employee development.
That's super helpful. I appreciate the translation, Mary. Great question, Tony. Engagement is largely structural, right? And in fact, that LinkedIn global talent trends report highlights specifically ping pong tables and beer in the fridge doesn't cut it. And in some regards, it never did, right? Like it wasn't material enough to move engagement. And so it's really rethinking what an engaging workplace looks like. So thank you. Okay, so questions that leaders can ask themselves and some tips around how to leverage flexible workplaces. I don't want to belabor all the questions, but I do think it is 100% fair to start with the needs of the business. If any process or any approach doesn't ultimately satisfy the needs of the business, it's not going to be sustainable. And so that's as much as I'll say around that series of questions. In terms of the right-hand side, the tips that we call out, it's okay to make changes as you go. We talked about that in leadership mindset. No one's going to expect a leader to be perfect. We are certainly getting used to starts and stops as it relates to flexibility in the workplace. The research is starting to point towards corporate social events. And so, Tony, that actually does get to the fun things. Is a great way to help draw people back into the office, to help them feel like my time in the office is well spent, and that's having a positive impact on employee retention. And so treating in-office work kind of as like a special thing, especially at this moment in time. Doesn't have to be for forever, but at this moment in time, in-office work, how can you distinguish it from another day of remote work?
You know what?
Oh, yeah,
go
Mary,
ahead. I was just
No,
going to interject. We have a great question about the impact we've seen with technology software that tracks employee productivity.
yeah,
Absolutely. There are certain industries where measuring accountability can be more difficult. And sometimes it is about, a customer service job. Yes, you have client satisfaction results, but I think being able to make sure that people are providing timely responses, things like that, where the software, the technology is really important. But, being clear around expectations and having clear metrics to measure progress is 100% necessary in order to support a flexible workplace. And so, you got to have, I mean, at the very least, the clear expectations and holding people accountable. And if it's more difficult, the software and tools will help you. So, sorry, Rick,
yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you answered it perfectly. The only thing I would add is like it goes back to leadership mindset, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're approaching the situation from like, well, I can't control everything that people do at home, then it's probably a healthier mindset, right? I'd argue you can't control what people do in the office as well, right? And so,
Yeah, one of the
kind of,
things we did at CorTalent, we've, running our company on EOS, we've always been highly metric driven. So, we measure how long a candidate is in our process, how many first line interviews we have, how many second line interviews, how many people we've presented. But some of the things we added when we started going remote, 100%, we're back in the office a couple days now. We added other metrics, such as how long are candidates in our clients process, things that we felt like, we could really make some positive impacts with the change in terms of, less candidate time because we were doing video interviews. And so again, we added some criteria, added some metrics. We're tracking more and we're proving that it's success. It's
yeah,
successful. So
because it's less about standing over someone's shoulders, whether in person or virtually, and it's more about setting that person up for success.
and results.
Results. Yep, exactly. Exactly. Great question. Okay, so let's go into professional development, which is often the biggest opportunity if we talk about employee retention. The cartoon that we have on screen, maybe some of you have seen it before. It's kind of an oldie but a goodie as you think about professional development work. Mary, I
Yeah.
shared this with you and you had a great reaction. You want to share it with the audience?
Yeah. I'd like to challenge those of you who are business owners and leaders, to think about employee development in a different way. Meaning, maybe my job is, of course, to run this business and have successful people in their roles. But part of my job might be also to help develop people, to add to their skill set and their experience so that, they may or may not move on to a different organization. And when I changed my mindset to that, everything became easier. Because I think if we can really invest in our people and train them, and they may leave us, but they will go on to do bigger and better things, and that's a great thing. So it's scary, but once you get there, it just changes the whole dynamics. So
Yeah. And I love that perspective because that's the aspirational positive side of professional development, Mary. What I think this cartoon so articulately brings forward is there's a huge drawback to not doing professional development.
exactly.
So let's talk about that for a second. Now, what Mary said around thinking differently about professional development, that's the center of the bullseye. What we're learning right now is that our mindsets around what constitutes professional development are likely outdated and could be tweaked in a way that makes it easier, more cost effective, and more impactful to do professional development. So the definition of professional development that we'll use for the next couple of slides is really any opportunity to build new skills and gain new experiences. And the takeaway that I'll emphasize in a slide or two is that a lot of it, and I'd argue most of it, should come from on-the-job learning opportunities. Now, Now, the risk of not doing professional development, to put it directly, skills dull over time. There's emerging research, well, there's established research that would say the half-life of a professional skill is about 5 years. And the emerging research is saying that this is actually getting shorter. They're thinking it's closer to 4 years now. And so at the risk of over-explaining, any professional skill that you're using today that you feel really good and you think is really impactful about, it's going to be about half as impactful as it is today in 4 or 5 years. Additionally, just employee psychology, using the same skill sets can be boring. People want a change of pace. People want to try something new. There's increased headspace and rethinking what skills are important for your career. And so there's a moment in time that we have right now where people are really interested in this, and there's a lot of value that organizations can derive. Doing professional development well helps prepare you and your organization for the future, helps employees be more aware of changing trends and how the direction of an industry or a specific role is changing, and it motivates employees. We're going to talk about careers being a lattice, not necessarily a ladder. And so bopping around, getting different experiences, trying out new things, that is really a strong motivator of engagement and helping people think about managing their careers, not just moving up in salary, moving up in title. We've already touched on this, and so I'm going to go very quickly and just say part of the LinkedIn Learning Global Talent Trends report was identifying professional development opportunities as the top area for leaders to invest in improving their company culture. And so there's just a tremendous amount of direct and tangential benefits that this specific area of focus can provide. Now, one of the main stumbling blocks that I've run into time and time again around professional development is just not knowing how to get started or what are the steps that I need to take as a leader to drive this forward. And so just to be very clear and direct, business needs are always the first place that you should go. Where does my business really need to invest in from a skill set perspective in order to provide a healthy development experience? From there, you want to actually talk to the person, right? You probably have an inkling in terms of who'd be a good fit for that development experience, but you want to make sure that they are passionate and interested and can really lean into the learning opportunity and do a good job. From there, you want to document a development goal. And the value of documenting the development goal is, one, it solidifies expectations, which we just know from management practices is important, but it also gives you something to go back to so that when you get to the fourth step in terms of following up and providing coaching, you're on the same page. You can check in, you can see the progress, you can help coach them through current challenges and make sure that that employee can work through that professional development opportunity in a really healthy way. Now, some additional pieces of advice. If you don't know where to start, as I mentioned before, really focus on on-the-job learning. Most of us have no shortage of challenges that need to be solved, stretch assignments that a person can lean into, opportunities to exercise innovation, right? Like just trying out something new. So there's millions, unlimited number of on-the-job learning opportunities. It just requires a little bit of having that filter and then letting those opportunities start to appear as a way of driving professional development.
And that's also a tie-in where we said if we have engaged people and we are retaining people, we can cut down on onboarding time and costs. Because onboarding is very difficult for people to do well. And if you can pair people up and have mentors and have that on the job learning, it really is way more effective.
Yep, you got it, Mary. Now, if you are going to spend, and typically spend would come in the form of formal learning, make sure you're prioritizing your high-performing employees. You're going to get the highest ROI by investing in those individuals. So really avoid the cookie cutter or peanut butter approach, excuse me, and know who your high-performing employees are. And then my number one piece of advice would be to just check in on progress. It is so easy for leaders and employees to have really good intentions, do a lot of good work creating the development goals. And then, you know, like a new project pops up or the business needs change and then the development plan goes out the window and then 6 months goes by and it's like, did you ever build those skills? No, I didn't. And so checking in on progress can really make sure that the employee continues to develop and that the business continues to reap those benefits of that activity. Okay, I'm gonna share a really quick story around lateral job movements, and then get you into breakouts so you have some time to share ideas in your smaller sessions, small group sessions. Lateral job moves can seem kind of scary for many business leaders because there's often significant questions around, well, what does that mean? How do I execute? So let me just share a quick story. I was on a team that was heavily impacted at the start of the pandemic. Some groups were way over capacity, some groups were way under capacity. So we needed to kind of move people around in order to meet immediate business challenges. What we found was that we were so surprised who raised their hand to volunteer for specific jobs. People you would have never guessed, right? And they ended up stepping into those roles and doing just a fantastic job. And so it was a great learning because we realized, oh, there's more appetite than we anticipated for people to try out new things, do things like a job share or, participate in an assignment project outside of my team's responsibilities. The person often didn't treat it like a promotion. It was just a temporary assignment. They were happy to go back to their job. Or if a job opened up on that new team, they were like already onboarded and they could just step in and do the work. And so the business became more efficient in terms of preparing people for new roles. And then the individual who did the stretch assignment or went to the different team often came back and shared learnings with their immediate team members. And they would say things like, did you know that this is why we do XYZ is so that they can do ABC? And so processes started to become clear. Process improvement ideas started to emerge. And so there were just all sorts of really, really cool benefits to lateral job moves. The main takeaway for leaders that I would encourage is that it doesn't have to be a formal full position rotation. It could be you're going to spend 4 hours a week sitting in with this team and you're going to help out with some of the less complex and challenging work so that you can get exposure to what they're doing. It can be that simple. And that has a tremendously positive impact on employer retention. So that was my very quick story. Just to quickly recap, what we'll focus on in the breakout rooms. Leadership mindset. Do I understand what I control, what I can influence, what I need to accept? How am I adapting? Flexible workplaces. What creative solutions have been overlooked? Am I being clear in terms of my expectations and holding people accountable? And then professional development, right? What are the on-the-job learning opportunities that maybe I've overlooked? Are my high performers getting the investment they need? Am I providing ongoing coaching and check-ins? So what I'm going to do in just a moment is I will whisk you away digitally into the breakout room. If you haven't gone through this experience, it can be a little bit disorienting, I suppose, in the sense that you're going to be in the large group, and then all of a sudden you're going to be with your breakout session. Now, it helps to set some ground rules for the breakout room. We don't have a ton of time, so I'd encourage you to avoid the pleasantries and just jump right into the discussion questions, which I'll share with you. And
no chit chat. No
chit chat. If you're sensing dead air, the first question is, who wants to go first? The goal really is to learn from each other. And so ask open-ended questions, share your personal experiences, but really treat this as a learning opportunity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit open, and you'll kind of go into a different experience in just a second. In the chat, I will post the questions that you see on the screen, so you don't have to memorize them for your breakout rooms. Yes, you got to experience the digital vortex that is the breakout room. Although usually I get treated to the end of someone's sentence that has no context, and so that's always my favorite part.
I was just going to say something really profound, and you cut me off.
Was that Mike B?
I suppose that's the other risk, right? We cut off the best wisdom right at the very end.
Yeah.
It's going to be really
okay,
good.
Tony, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I always like to elevate at least one comment to get a sense of what was discussed in small groups. So if it's not your profound wisdom, what was some of the profound wisdom shared in your breakout session?
Well, no, we had a lot of profound wisdom in our breakout. It was a good discussion. So yeah, I mean, it's just the whole flexibility and, kind of the mindset that we come in with that,
Yeah.
it's, can we trust people to do this or whatever? And we kind of have to get over that.
Yeah, it's very well said. We kind of have to just move past that part of the conversation. I don't feel the need to say. And Mary, any thoughts from your end on that comment?
No, I agree. It's that whole shift in your mindset. I think the whole world is different. I was
Mhm.
telling a story the other day on a podcast I was doing where, when I had children, I'm 56. I brought my kids to daycare. They went to daycare all the time. You look at how people have to deal with daycare situations today. I mean, a little sniffle, a little bit of red eye, and you're keeping your kid home, because of COVID and everything. So the whole world has changed. I used to have that separation of work
I
and
saw it too late.
life. Yeah, exactly. So it's just, it's all changed. So we need a new mindset.
So Mary, how do you deal with, and that makes perfect sense, but let's just say I have a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old at home. They're not going to be off watching movies all day while I'm working. How do you
Yeah.
deal with the fact that you have to be a parent first and then
Yep.
work second? And
Well, that's where a work-life integration can come into play. Now, knowing that that doesn't always pertain to every single industry or every single job, but for recruiting, there are times where yes, our people have to be there for their children, but then they can do interviews and things in the evening or early morning or even on the weekends. And so I think that's where this kind of work-life integration can come into play. And it doesn't have to be all the time. Maybe it's just situational.
Okay. And one of
Well,
those
just for the sake of
paradigms.
time, I want to call out that we're at the top of the hour. I truly appreciate this opportunity to share this content with you. This was a fantastic conversation. Love the questions and the conversations. We're going to try and do this on a regular cadence. Right now, we're thinking about every other month. And so if you enjoyed this session, come back, share this with your friends. If you want to continue the conversation, reach out to either Mary or myself directly. We would be more than happy to give a free consulting session and just kind of brainstorm with you. In the thank you email that will go out tomorrow, in addition to the recording, we'll also have a link to book 15-minute discussions on my calendar. And so to the extent that you want to talk to me directly, want to make it as easy as possible for you. On the screen right now, we've got some of our assessments and our consulting work that we're focused on. So just want to make it clear in terms of the types of services and engagements that we participate with our clients. And more than anything, thank you. This was just a really, really fun conversation. I appreciate your time today.